Hello and welcome to episode 120 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chase Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by Mathias and and Chris Bello, friends of the show and MMO's own. Guys, thanks for coming on. As you know, obviously the Mets have signed a reliever. I don't know if it was the reliever everybody thought they were going to get, but the Mets do sign Devin Williams, the former Yankee, 3 years, $50 million. People probably remember him now for the Alonso home run a couple of years ago against the when he was with the Brewers in Milwaukee. Like I said, he was with the Yankees last year. Didn't start the season out well, but I think seemed to figure things out. Not in a closer role though, but figure things back out the second half of the year. And if this guy's right, obviously he's got like the best changeup in baseball. They call it the airbender when it's right. So hopefully good deal by the Mets. And hopefully it's more to come as far as the bullpen is concerned, because there's another guy out there that closed this game for the Mets that they still need to re-sign. So we'll get to that, but just want to get your thoughts on the signing here. Chris, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I thought it was a great signing. The Mets last year definitely missed that eighth inning guy and that seventh inning guy, and Devin Williams eventually became that after his struggles in New York. So, I'll tee up Mac for the peripherals. They looked great. The 4.79, I think, is what everybody focuses on at first. But I think overall it's a great signing, pending on what they do now for a ninth or other eighth inning guy.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was a perplexing year. 4.79 ERA, 3.11 xERA, 2.68 FIP, 2.95 xFIP. 3.6 strikeout to walk ratio. That's his highest he's ever had over a full season. So that doesn't include his rookie year, which was over 5, but that was a shortened season. His expected batting average against was only 195. And he also didn't allow a run in 17 of his last 19 regular season outings, and also didn't allow a run in any of his 4 postseason outings. And his changeup still graded out as one of the best in the majors. So it's really confusing because everything about him says that he's still a great pitcher, except his ERA last year. And some of it can be attributed. He was really bad with men on last year. His strand rate was only 55%. But considering they also are deferring some money on this contract, this is about, I saw someone say it's about the same amount of money per year that Ryan Helsley just got with Baltimore. So my grade on this still is dependent on if the Mets can re-sign Edwin Diaz, but whether it's as a closer or as a setup man, I think this is a nice contract, and the Mets needed an arm. I had a strong feeling from the start that David Stern's familiarity with Williams is going to lead him to Flushing. So I expected this deal to happen, and honestly, I'm glad it did. I think it'll really help the bullpen going forward.
Yeah, hopefully, like you said, you kind of can't grade it until you see what they do overall with it. I know I kind of teased it, but yeah, Edwin Diaz is still out there. I think that the Mets have to, under any circumstances, have to bring him back. You can't let him go to a team like the Dodgers or anyone else, really. I don't love Williams as the closer for this team long term. I like him a lot more in that setup role. And obviously, if you have the flexibility of Diaz, there'll be days where Devin Williams will close, but it makes this bullpen a lot shorter without Diaz. But it's a really good start. Obviously, we had his struggles in the beginning of the year, like we're mentioning. But he still has a great out pitch. And it just hopefully the first of many arms. I feel like that's the same thing we've kind of been repeating here. But that's the matter of it. The Mets need, whether it's the rotation or in the bullpen, the Mets need quality arms here. So the more the merrier. This is a good start for it. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully Williams, I guess to the one point, obviously, like his kind of struggles early on with the Yankees. I'll give him credit that he's not shying away from New York again, right? He's not running out of here. So maybe that's something he could build on. Obviously, and to talk about Diaz, he's someone who struggled when he first got here. He figured it out. And obviously, he's someone the Mets need to bring back. So, hopefully that was a good learning experience for Devin Williams, and we'll see how that goes. But we guess we can kind of transition from the pitching to the player side of things. Another guy they have to bring back is Pete that we talked about, and someone else that probably is going to be on the way out is Jeff McNeil now. Obviously with the Mets doing what they did, making the trade for Simeon. They have an everyday second baseman. McNeil never seemed like the most loved person in that clubhouse. We know things with him and Lindor. There was other stuff that came out, whatever. But, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on what you guys would think. I don't even know what you would get from McNeil at this point. He's going to be 34 years old. He's making like $11 million a year. I know the Mets probably have to kick in a little money to make whenever they get back a little better. But just kind of thoughts on, do you think the Mets should keep him as like the first man off the bench? Or it seems like at this point his time is going to be coming to an end. So, Mathias, let me know.
Yeah, realistically, I don't see a role for Jeff McNeil in the Mets next year. And I know you could easily say right now, okay, he can play left field instead of Brandon Nimmo. Well, the thing is that McNeil's bat fell off badly enough late in the season that I don't know if he can hit enough to be an everyday player.
Sure.
Yes, he still finished the year with a 111 OPS plus, but he was borderline unplayable in September. Which is hard to say about a guy who is a former batting champion. Really, it was just shocking because you really saw him look like the old Jeff McNeil in the second half of 2024 before the injury. That's the issue. He's been plagued by injuries the last few years. I mean, 2023 he tore the UCL in his non-throwing elbow. 2024 he gets hit in the wrist and has to miss a chunk of time. This year he began the year on the injured list, and then it turns out after the season, he needed surgery on his wrist because he had thoracic outlet syndrome. So really, it's been a rough end to his New York tenure. Now, it's not a certain thing that he's going to get dealt, but I think some team would appreciate having a guy who's versatile like him. And yes, he's gotten slower. His range isn't as good as it once was, but he's sort of a Swiss Army knife. He can still play second. He can still play all three outfield positions. Heck, you could play him at first. If you really, really need him to play third base, he can play third base. Heck, he was even the emergency catcher. He never actually appeared behind the plate, but he was the emergency catcher. So while he is turning 34 in April, I think they can throw him into a trade, maybe for an arm. I know I saw someone today mention maybe Mitch Keller as a possibility. Someone, he has a bit of money on his contract, and McNeil has 2 years if you include his mutual option. So he has 2 years left of club control. So some team, I think, will find value in him. I know that his bat has fallen off, but he's still sort of like what Ben Zobrist was a little bit, albeit Zobrist was a much better hitter at this point in his career. But he plays multiple positions. He hits enough to keep his bat in the lineup. So while he might be on his way out of New York, I think some team can find value in him, and the Mets could probably get a decent piece back.
Yeah, Jeff McNeil's an interesting player because there's so many avenues the Mets can go down heading into next year. And I think what David Stern showed us by trading Brandon Nimmo was that these are none of his players, and he will do whatever he pleases or wants to do with them. So is that trading Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio and going to get Tarek Skubal? Or is that what Mathias said, trading Jeff McNeil and going to get Mitch Keller? Well, we really don't know, but I do think if they move off Jeff McNeil, it's probably a salary dump. Maybe send him to Pittsburgh, maybe send him somewhere else, get a lower level arm, and just get rid of that contract altogether. Because at the end of the day, like Mathias was saying, I don't see how Jeff McNeil, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, even Luis Angel Acuna gets playing time with Jeff McNeil here. And one of the other things that I think the trickle effect has is Brandon Nimmo being traded. It really allows David Stearns to have all of this freedom. And I don't think he feels comfortable from a player operator going into the next season with Jeff McNeil as his left fielder.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, they want to upgrade there, whether it's letting one of these young guys play, like you're saying, they don't want him blocking a spot there. And just to change the scenery in general. I do think a team won't take a chance on a former batting champion sort of thing, like you're talking about, being that first, super utility guy off the bench. But it seems like it's just the best kind of fit for everybody. And it's a good point, Chris, that you mentioned just about Stearns for trading Nimmo and stuff too, that these are not his players that he drafted and developed. He's going to do what he thinks is going to be the best move. And, like you said, they already freed up one spot in the outfield and one left-handed bat. It would help to free them up with another one, McNeil. And it'll be interesting, to see how that happens. I don't to your point, it might be one of those things where you're getting, a minor league arm, and you'll see kind of in the next couple of years how that happens. I mean, the Mets just need arms in general. So if they could get something better, like a Mitch Keller or something, better in the sense of that can help them now, I would do that, but that remains to be seen. And it's a good point you made too, Chris, about Mauricio and Beatty. If you get them to Pittsburgh or Detroit, if that's what it takes, or all it takes to get one of the two guys I think you're thinking of, sign me up. But it remains to be seen. I guess no matter what, you're gonna have some younger guys that are gonna need some spots here to fill out the bench too. So it's seems kind of inevitable. Obviously, anything could happen. If there isn't a market, the Mets aren't going to give anyone away for free, I guess. But I would imagine, outside of the baseball things, also just clubhouse things. Obviously, we mentioned him and Lindor seem to not get along or whatever. They used to joke about Happy Jeff. I don't want to call him a selfish player. I don't know. But it kind of steers that way. So, if they're trying to change, obviously after what happened last year, you send a guy like Nimmo out, obviously you're really trying to change the culture in the clubhouse. So it just seems inevitable. It'll be interesting to see when it happens and what return they kind of get back for him.
Yeah.
Mathias, please go.
Okay. You were talking about like Happy Jeff. Is that late in the year we saw I know that the whole team was struggling, but he especially. And look, I'm not a mind reader or anything, but his body language looked like a guy who's exhausted. I understand that he, wasn't, like I said, he wasn't playing the best. The team wasn't playing the best, but you could really see the wear and tear on him, I feel like, and it reflected in his performance. So, maybe it is the best for him to be on a different team next year. And maybe it is better for the clubhouse. I think they brought in a really good clubhouse guy in Semien, and he's replacing another guy who was very well regarded in the clubhouse in Nimmo. McNeil, I mean, I'm not sure where he plays into this right now. And like Chris was saying, finding playing time for everyone. And we didn't even mention Mark Vientos into this.
Right.
Vientos is another guy who'd be impacted by McNeil's presence. So, Jeff Passan put out, for ESPN, his 25 list of trade candidates, and he listed McNeil's probability of being moved at 80%. So it seems like the writing is kind of on the wall here.
Yeah, I agree with what Mathias was just saying. And I know you were mentioning earlier too, he's the backup catcher and he can play here and there. Even the way David Stearns was talking about him, it was almost like he was trying to move him. Like, oh, look, Jeff can play even first base if Pete Alonso leaves. He can play the outfield. He can play second, third, all these positions. And it just kind of seems like Jeff's, the writing's on the wall with him. And the other point I was going to make about the clubhouse, I really do think it's so overblown. I do think Jeff McNeil and Francisco Lindor have their problems. I'm not trying to sell you the idea they're best friends, but I always go back to A-Rod and Derek Jeter and how the New York media kind of made them hate each other. They look like best friends now on television together. So I think it's a little overblown, the clubhouse stuff, but I do think that maybe moving on from him would help that clubhouse dynamic a little better.
Yeah, and like I said, with the year they had last year, changes were obviously going to be made. And again, you move a guy like Brandon Nimmo, who outside of Lindor, it seems like the captain of the Mets as far as has been here the longest. Was drafted by them at 17 or whatever. Spent 15 years in the organization. Through coming up to his time in the big leagues. Who knows? You can't. At this point, this core, and obviously there's some free, Alonso's a free agent or whatever, but you gave it a few runs with this. Now it's time, obviously, even with the addition of Soto last year, things went totally south. So they have to try and make it work. And long term, they're committed to guys like Soto and Lindor. So, frankly, they're, I would assume, going to do what is they think gel with them the best, as well. So, like you're all saying, the writing seems on the wall, and hopefully it's a trade that works best for him, works better for the Mets, and they keep going. But I guess last thing we can kind of just talk about Alonso a little bit. I know there's nothing really going on. There's a lot of stuff reported. He wants a lot of money in a lot of years, obviously. And there's reports of the Red Sox are in, things like that. who knows? I think it's kind of all posturing until it really happens. It'll be interesting to see when he actually signs. If that's a winter meetings thing or whatnot. But I guess we can all just kind of comment on, around the comments. I know there's nothing, totally new, but just kind of like your thoughts and, where you stand as far as with bringing him back.
I mean,
Chris, go ahead. Sorry, Mathias, go.
Yeah, well, his comments or the report that came out recently that he's still waiting for a team to step to the forefront has me wondering if we're going to end up in a situation like last year. No, I'm not thinking he stays on the market until late January or early February like last year. But if he's waiting for someone to make a bigger or more substantial offer, I'm wondering if his ask of 7 years is once again being proven unrealistic. Because while Alonso at least had a huge bounce back year, we spoke about this with Pat Ragazzo a couple weeks ago, but I don't see the Mets being the team to offer him that super long-term contract. The more that I think about it, though, I don't know if any team will give him those 7 years that he's looking for. This is a guy who's about to turn 31. And yes, he had 142 OPS plus last year. His defense continues to regress. He's essentially going to be a DH going forward. So I think he's a great fit for the Mets lineup. But I'm also having a hard time thinking of other teams that will really be in play besides the Mets and the Red Sox. So I think the Mets should bring him back mainly for his bat. But if some team is going to give him a contract longer than 5 years, I would say, then I have a hard time seeing David Stearns going to that length to try to bring him back.
Yeah, when it comes to Pete Alonso, I totally agree. The only other suitable team for Alonso really is the Boston Red Sox, and they haven't really spent like the Red Sox of the last 20 years. And I don't know if they're willing to commit so much money and on top of that years to a first baseman who, let's be frankly honest, isn't a great defender and at the same time is on the wrong side of 30. I don't know if they feel comfortable doing that. From the Mets perspective, I've always thought it made the most sense for them to bring back Pete Alonso, but kind of similar to how when Steve Cohen first bought the team, you don't want to just keep throwing money at players just because you can. And why should David Stearns bid against himself when it comes to Pete Alonso? Let other teams go out there, let him get a 7-year deal, and then let him come back to you and see if you want to match. But outside of that, I always thought that Pete Alonso viewed himself as a Freddie Freeman-esque kind of player, and he should be getting that 6-year, $180 million deal. But in all reality, he's more of a 125 player, and that's a hell of a good deal. But, when you keep asking for that 7-year deal in the 30 AAV, which he did, I believe, get last season just on a short deal, I don't think a lot of teams are going to give him that. And to make matters worse, the only other team I can really think about that could use Pete Alonso is the Washington Nationals. But they're kind of a mess right now. They just fired their manager last season. They just switched over baseball operations by letting Mike Rizzo go. So I don't know if they're willing to give a long-term contract out right now.
And for reference, by the way, his player option for this coming year would have been $24 million. So if he's looking for a pay raise in AAV on top of the length of the contract, I have a hard time thinking of more teams that would be willing to give a guy like that that type of deal. And also, I've said this in the past. I really think he would benefit greatly from continuing to hit behind Juan Soto. He no longer would have to be the 1A power guy. I can think of very few teams that have the protection that a protection like Soto that he would get and be able to produce in that type of lineup.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I think Soto wants Alonso hitting behind him. You know what I mean? Soto finished third in the MVP this year, almost 1,000 OPS, 43 home runs. Having Pete hit behind him and do what he does, being an elite, not only slugger but driving in runs. He doesn't want, and no offense, he doesn't want Mark Vientos hitting behind him the whole year. He doesn't want that. He wants Alonso. So I don't know if there has anything to do with that. I'm sure, it's less than anything, but you know, the lineup is completely different with and without Pete Alonso, and hopefully the Mets understand that. But like you guys said, you got to let the market play out, and the Mets, I assume, have the advantage. No matter what offers he get, they're going to be able to match. Because ultimately, I think he likes being here, and he fits on the, you know, fits in the lineup. So, you know, it remains to be seen. We'll just see when it happens. Hopefully it's more of a winter meetings thing, and so it's not into the new year and everything like that. But you know, this is the hot stove. Now sign Edwin Diaz. You can sign Edwin Diaz now, then you can sign Pete Alonso after that, and a bunch of other arms, and maybe an outfielder if you want to sign Kyle Tucker or Cody Bellinger. We didn't even talk about those guys because we did that the last time. But you know, there's still a lot of moves that they can make, which is a good thing. And we'll see how it goes here. So I think that's going to wrap everything up for this week. But you know, good signing by the Mets. Hopefully it's, like we said, the first of many to come, and we'll keep you updated as they do. So as always, let's go Mets.